To buckle up. We are in for a long and bumpy ride. Leading off our discussion tonight is Lisa Graves, who we booked because of her expertise as a former staffer on the Senate Judiciary Committee. She also has experience in the Justice Department as a former Deputy Assistant Attorney General under President Clinton. She knows how congressional committees interact with the DOJ and how critical negotiations like this one happening now take place. Also joining us tonight, Ambassador Wendy Sherman, former Undersecretary of State for Political Affairs and an MSNBC Global Affairs contributor, and Jonathan Alter, columnist for the Daily Beast and an MSNBC political analyst. Lisa, I do want to start with you first, because it does seem like there is going to be a battle between Congress, specifically Democrats in the House, and the DOJ. If Democrats want to see the entire redacted version, and they're arguing that they're able to keep that secret if you're worried about sources and methods or you're worried about grand jury material, what sort of argument will they make to the Justice Department that will succeed?
Well, I'm not sure about that, but I think they may end up having to go to court over it. What you see here is Congress that isn't a co-equal branch of this government. Congress, in fact, has superior authority in the area of impeachment. It's specifically given the power of impeachment. And what you're seeing from the Justice Department is really an effort to ignore history. What you saw in Watergate was a prosecutor who did not reach conclusions or recommendations, but was preparing that material extensively in Watergate for Congress's determination, because it certainly is Congress's determination whether to impeach President Trump for high crimes and misdemeanors, whatever they may be. And I don't know about you, Katie, but I was certainly shocked to hear that there were 400 pages in this report. Now, as a lawyer, that's like 200,000 words, and that's not even counting the appendices and graphs and charts. The idea that William Barr would hold to himself and with Rod Rosenstein the right to just basically summarize that and dismiss that evidence going from a Friday night to a Sunday, that's not enough time for any normal person to actually assess that evidence. And after 40 lawyers, 50 investigators, 2,500 subpoenas, 500 witnesses, the idea that they could reach this conclusion and think that it's going to stick is pretty absurd. Congress has the right to that material, and I would say the American people have a right to see that material as well.
Wouldn't Barr be playing with fire, though, if he sent out a memo of principal conclusions from the Mueller report? And again, his decision on obstruction was his and not Mueller's, but that greatly deviated from what Mueller presented in his actual report.
Yeah, I think that's not likely to have happened, but the devil's always in the details. And at some point soon, Congress, anyway, is going to see those details, and this whole story may take on a very different coloration. Just because he didn't commit a crime, according to Mueller, doesn't mean that the president and the people around him weren't engaged in seriously improper behavior, and we might get insights into that. We will get insights into that when we see this material. Now, Watergate was just mentioned. There was a very interesting, relevant case in 1974. It's called Haldeman versus Sarika. And in that case, an appellate court found overwhelmingly that Congress did have the right to this material from the Justice Department. So, if they abide by precedent, Congress will get this. Whether they get it on April 2nd or later on remains to be seen. But we are going to see this, and the pressure works, Katie. The fact that Barr had to back and fill today so he didn't look like a political hack, that meant that what's happened over the last week with these calls for the release of the report have been having an effect.
Lisa, though, let's talk about what Barr has said he would redact. I mean, there's information that he says he's going to redact in there that would potentially jeopardize current investigations. And we know that there are other investigations going on. Is there an argument to be made that some of that might need to be redacted? When you're talking about sources and methods, might some of that need to be redacted if the intelligence community weighs in? Are there valid arguments, in your opinion and from your experience, to redact some material that might be in this report?
Well, I certainly think for the Intelligence Committee in the House, for HPSC, they deal with sources and methods material all the time. They deal with some of the most sensitive information in the entire U.S. intelligence community, and there's no basis for redacting that from that committee. In terms of the other committees, I think Congressman Nadler is right. They have a right to see that full report. And there are circumstances in which the Justice Department and Congress negotiate about the terms of sharing information, particularly, for example, grand jury information. But it's certainly not the case that there's no precedent for sharing grand jury information with Congress, and that there's certainly no precedent to suggest that the White House and the administration can't share sources and methods information. That's opposite of the reality. The reality is there's ample precedent for sharing this information with Congress under terms that are negotiated. And I think there's ample precedent for the vast majority of that information that it does not pertain to a pending prosecution to be made public for all the American people to read.
Ambassador, this investigation is not just about Donald Trump and his campaign. It's about, we believe it's about Russia and how Russia meddled or attacked our elections and how they were influential. What sort of information does the public need to see, in your opinion, to give us a better idea of what exactly happened in 2016 so we're informed for 2020?
Well, first of all, you know, one of the big differences between the United States and Russia is we're a democracy. We believe in transparency. We think transparency is important for accountability. Our most sacred documents start off, "We the people," because government is about citizens asking for a government, but that government is governed by the people. And so transparency is about respecting people in a democracy. And we undermine our institutions when we don't have that transparency because it makes people even more suspect. And we've seen how the president has tried to tear down American institutions. So if William Barr does not share a full report with Congress, and the Congress doesn't share as much as possible with the American people, we're undermining the very nature of our democracy. And we are saying to Russia that the way you conduct yourselves, which is full of secrecy and KGB tactics, because President Putin is really a KGB agent now governing his country, that we are really heading in the wrong direction. I must say, Katie, I wonder, the president goes and does his big rallies. He really talks about everything with the people at his rallies. I would hope that he respects those people enough to share all the information with them and not be worried a bit about it, because that's who we are as a country.
Well, you might be holding your breath for a while. Ambassador,
yes.
What is the message that Russia is already getting? I mean, Adam Schiff would say that there's evidence of collusion. Republicans would push back on that. So would Donald Trump. Regardless, it seems like from at least the Barr version of Mueller's report that there was no conspiracy here. There was not enough evidence of conspiracy to criminally convict anybody. But what we do have is a presidential candidate, at the very least, standing at a podium in July of 2016 and saying, Russia, if you're listening, find the emails. There was a presidential candidate waving around the WikiLeaks releases and saying, I love WikiLeaks, and reading off the embarrassing information to his advantage. That stuff all happened very much in the open. Then there's a reporting on the Don Jr. Trump Tower meeting. We know all of that. What is the message that Russia's already gotten?
The message that Russia's gotten is that the Attorney General of the United States can put out a 4-page document about a 400-page report and basically say everything is okay, and Russia, you've gotten away with it. I think that Putin probably feels pretty good today. Now, when those 400 pages come out, and I really think there will be a big push to get them out, because 75% of the American people in a new poll that came out today are in support, including a majority of Republicans in support of the report becoming public, because it belongs to the American citizens to find out what's really gone on here. What's really concerning, Katie, beyond all of this, is there is no really comprehensive plan in our government to ensure that we do everything possible to make sure that our next election is safe and secure. We know that Russians tried again in the 2018 election. We don't think there was any major problem with that election, but it was because a lot of people in states and a lot of other people were on board. A presidential campaign raises the stakes considerably, and I don't think our government's prepared to take this on.
On the flip side, what does it say to a presidential candidate going forward and what they can do?
Well,
I think it says to a president. Sorry, John.
Hold on, John.
I think, you know, eventually the Congress is going to enact legislation, as it did after Watergate, to correct a lot of the abuses that we've seen. But, you know, one thing very interesting that Barr mentioned today was he said he is, quote, required to redact to protect reputational interests. That is a loophole that you could drive a Mack truck through.
Yeah.
He could basically redact the whole thing, since everybody's reputation is on the line. But what he didn't mention is that his reputation is on the line too. Talk about reputational interests. I mean, you know, when he was Attorney General in 1992, William Safire, a conservative columnist, wrote a column about what a hack Attorney General Barr was, because he was protecting President Bush from an independent counsel. If he continues to engage in such a shameless political fashion, one member of Congress called it a cover-up. We're not. You
heard it right at the top of the show.
Yeah, we're not quite there yet, but it's beginning to smell a little bit like a cover-up. If he continues down this road, he will hurt not just his own reputation, but he will remind the American people that the president really has something to hide.
Jonathan Alter, thank you very much. Sorry, I didn't mean to cut you off there on the end. Wendy Sherman and Lisa Graves, I apologize. Appreciate it, guys. Thank you for joining us tonight. And coming up.